Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. We have with us Melissa Quinn. She is a reporter for the Daily Signal, Heritage Foundation, graduate of Florida University, University of Florida, formerly reported for Red Alert. She's been on this program before, an expert in Obamacare, reporting on the issues surrounding it. This program is made possible by the McPherson Tax Defense Group, 1-800-BEAT-IRS, BeatIRS.com, serving Alaskans, Americans since 1978, with 2 generations of tax defense attorneys that make this program possible. Melissa, I wanted to talk to you a little bit with regard to the article that you wrote and posted recently at the Daily Signal entitled, "What You Need to Know About the Obamacare Program Criticized as a Bailout for Insurers." But first, given your reporting on Obamacare, maybe you can give us an overview of Obamacare, whether or not the administration is still touting that it's a success, and then kind of your overall assessment as to whether it is a success at this point.
Right, so just like you said, it depends on who you ask in terms of how well the health care law is doing. The Obama administration, of course, is touting the record number of Americans who are uninsured, which they want to be very low, obviously, because of the law. However, I have seen and received emails from countless readers who are saying now that they're in the 3rd open enrollment period, they're hearing from their insurance companies that their premiums are going up, their deductibles are going up, they're not able to keep their doctors. So while the Obama administration and certainly Democrats in Congress are rolling out a bunch of success stories related to Obamacare, there are also Americans across the country who are really feeling the pain because of this law.
Well, and the connection, the causal factor is what really is in play. We've had people on this program that have talked about how, their policy rates have gone up. We've had stories, horror stories about, people making $40,000 to $50,000 a year who now pay 20% of their income for their insurance program, which before the Affordable Care Act, that wasn't the case. The only thing that really has happened between the time that they weren't paying this much and what they're now paying is the Affordable Care Act. But the administration says there's no correlation, that those cost increases have nothing to do with Obamacare. What say you?
Well, it's interesting. I think there were 2 major announcements that were made within the past few weeks that have certainly dealt a blow to the law and the positive messages that the Obama administration and congressional Democrats are saying. The first being United Healthcare, which is the country's largest insurer, said that they're considering leaving the exchanges in 2017, and they actually found that their business that they did on the exchanges lost them money. And then secondly, the Congressional Budget Office just came out with a report this week that said that by 2025, we could see the workforce shrink by 2 million people, and that is attributed to Obamacare. So 2 big announcements within probably the last month that seem to have reflected poorly on the status and how the law is going.
So you lose money in the exchange as an insurer, then you pass on those increased costs in the form of higher premiums to your clients, to your customer base.
Yes, and narrower networks as well in some cases.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's kind of a quirk in all of this, though. That I saw, and again, it all depends on who writes, all depends on who does the assessment, the collation of the data. But apparently, there are in some areas of healthcare, costs are not increasing as much as they were before the Affordable Care Act. And I've theorized that if in fact this is true, it's probably because many of these health plans have now shifted much of the upfront cost to their customer base, to the insured. In other words, there's higher deductibles, there's more copay. So people now are doing what Republicans have been trying to do for a long time, and that's introducing a cost-benefit analysis into healthcare decisions where they know they got to pay, $5,000, $10,000 up front before insurance kicks in. So now instead of having third-party payer make the determination as to what is paid and how the provider gets paid, the individual's making a decision. Look, I've got limited funds. I've got to have care. I mean, do you think that is the reason that maybe some of these costs are slowing in increase, or do you think that's all fudged data? It's not really happening.
Gosh, I guess we'll have to see. I don't think it's any secret. I think it was Jonathan Gruber who said a couple of years ago at MIT when he was giving a talk, around the country about the healthcare law that in a lot of cases, the health insurance companies were going to be passing down the costs to the consumers. And, I mean, these guys, they have to make money. They're dealing with a riskier pool of consumers because of that pre-existing condition provision of the law. So in some way, they have a bottom line to look out for, and the best way to do that is to raise the price of premiums and narrow those networks.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, it's one of the major criticisms of Obamacare at the beginning was that this was basically a scheme between the elites and the insurance companies for the insurance companies to make even more money. Built-in guarantees and protections. That's subject to debate now, right? The Republicans are kind of zeroing in, at least some of them, on this guarantee to the insurance companies that they aren't going to lose money. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so that really speaks to the heart of what is known as the risk corridor program that was implemented under the law. And essentially, the whole goal of the program was really to provide some stability for insurance companies in the market, which was disrupted when Obamacare was implemented. The way the program works, in the simplest of terms, was that if an insurance company makes an excess profit that is determined by the federal government, they essentially pay into this fund that is operated by the federal government. And then if insurance companies lose beyond an excess or register excess losses, they receive money from that same pool that their fellow insurance companies paid into. Now, where the taxpayer comes in, and this is where really a lot of Republicans, and specifically Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, have really had an issue with this program, is that it is up to the taxpayer and taxpayer dollars to make up any sort of shortfall. So what we're talking about is if insurance companies who lost a lot of money are requesting more money from the government than what the insurance companies put into that same pot of money. And in terms of most recently, the way the program was working, we were talking about a $2.5 billion shortfall.
Are any insurers actually contributing money to the fund?
I actually don't know.
I mean,
I don't
just
know
think
the
about
number.
it. These are sophisticated entities, and if they can show a loss, I mean, they'll just pay their execs more money, so they end up with a loss, and they get money from government. I mean, I don't know what kind of oversight there is, probably not much, but I would think that this is probably built to fail. That's what it kind of sounds like to me.
Well, here's an interesting perspective in talking about, I don't know the exact number of insurance companies that were profitable. I know, speaking from, United Healthcare, they obviously were not profitable, and they've been in the business for a long time. The profitable insurance companies last year, so for 2014, put in $362 million into the risk corridor program. Now, meanwhile, the insurance companies that lost money requested $2.8 billion. So there's a huge discrepancy between the money that the profitable insurance companies put into this pot and the money that those that lost money wanted from the same pot of money. So I think that certainly speaks to how a lot of insurance companies did in the first year that this program was actually in effect.
A net demand for $2.5 billion from the federal government. I would assume that was a cost of the Affordable Care Act that was not projected at the outset, right?
I'm not quite sure if that was something that the CBO or other entities that would look at the full cost of the law take into effect. Unfortunately, in terms of the risk corridor program, I don't think that they fully knew, the federal government really knew how much money those insurance companies were going to request because, look, the law has only been in effect really for 2 years. They were entering the third open enrollment period. And insurance companies, it's taken them a little bit, it seems, to really figure out where they should set their rates to where they're not operating in the red.
What are we doing now to address this? I mean, again, as I indicated earlier, you affirmed there are some Republicans that want to relook at this. Is the idea that we just pull the rug out from under the insurance companies, let them basically face bankruptcy or what other type of cost accommodations they have to take, or what's the plan?
So a lot of Republicans are actually calling this an insurer bailout, sort of to speak to the role that the taxpayers are playing in this whole thing. Now, Marco Rubio has really sort of made this his baby. He has been advocating for a repeal of the risk corridor program since 2013. He introduced legislation, and unfortunately it was not successful. But what he did successfully do was attach a measure to the omnibus spending bill last year that essentially said that no taxpayer dollars could be used for the risk corridor program. You had to get the money from the insurance companies. He is looking to introduce a similar language into this year's spending bill. And as you know, Congress is currently in the process of debating that. They haven't released any official language yet. But to my knowledge, it certainly is something that Marco Rubio is pushing for. Other outside conservative groups want to make sure that those protections for taxpayers are included. So it definitely is getting a lot of traction, and I have heard that it likely will be included.
We had a guest on this program, I think, trying to remember whether or not he was from the Daily Signal, but was suggesting that Paul Ryan and Marco Rubio had promised revisions to Obamacare but had not delivered. Is there any other plan that you're aware of from Marco Rubio regarding some of the other issues with Affordable Care Act that are in the works, or are you familiar with that?
So Rubio seems to, from everything that I've read as well as seen and heard from him, he really does seem to be focusing on the risk corridor program. I do want to mention, though, that we heard about this reconciliation bill that passed the Senate. It was a huge moment, the first time the Senate has ever voted to repeal Obamacare, and it's currently making its way through the House. Now, that package did include a provision to fully repeal the risk corridor program. Democrats objected to it under budgetary means, under a budgetary maneuver, and unfortunately for Republicans, it had to be stripped out of the bill. So over the course of the last few years, we have seen Republicans make a lot of efforts to protect the taxpayer dollars and either repeal the program in its entirety, repeal the risk corridor program in its entirety, or at least make sure that no taxpayer dollars are being used for it.
Yeah, and I want to correct this a little bit. It was actually Chris Jacobs that was on this program. He was with Heritage before. I think he's with Conservative Review now. Who was critical of the fact that both Ryan and Rubio had promised an alternative plan to Obamacare and had not delivered. I think he speculated in that interview as politics had kind of intervened with the presidential election and everything else. But one of the things that is a glaring omission right now, and this is a huge criticism I have of Republicans, is that there has not really been an aggressive plan to replace Obamacare, to repeal Obamacare. And when push comes to shove, of course, everybody runs for cover. They don't want to take the stand necessary to push back against the president and his fundamental transformation of this country. I appreciate the work that's being done around the edges. And I don't know. I mean, maybe this is not the edges. I mean, this is a lot of money. It's $2.5 billion. But I think really what we've got to focus on, and I think you probably agree, is a plan to get rid of Obamacare and replace the government with individuals making decision-making on their own so that we can get cost limitations in effect through the market, right? I mean, that's really the only solution here is the market, right?
Yeah, we'll have to see what 2017 brings, and if there's a Republican president, I'm sure that they'll be working closely with Congress to repeal and replace the law.
Let's hope. I really appreciate you, Melissa Quinn, giving us information on what's happening with Obamacare, the efforts that are being undertaken to address the bailout with the insurers. Stay with us, The Joe Miller Show. We'll be right back after these messages.